So we're here at Superbooth 2024. It's been going great. This is day 3. I'm here with Geert Bevin, who I just met at Moog, and I'm so happy to have met you and started some conversation about what you're doing at Moog. And why don't you just repeat a little bit of what you do at Moog, and then we're going to get into another interesting to me conversation about producing digital versions of analog things, and also where digital can go in terms of producing its own new things, and what are the pitfalls, and where do we stand these days. And I think we have quite the expert here, and you're going to find that out.
So yeah, I've been at Moog for 10 years now. I started because Moog released their first iPad synthesizer called Moog, and I was really into like gestural control and figuring out how you could get more expression with synthesis and digital synthesizers. And then I started working with Moog, and then over the years basically released all of the apps that we've made on iPad, and also moved on to macOS, to Windows, built out an amazing team of software engineers, designers, people that have that culture of Moog in their DNA, and that really think about how to create these experiences in software that you get with the hardware, and it's your conversation with the synthesizer, and it's just trying to get that in a more affordable form factor, mobile form factors, but also in ways that are not limited by I have one Moog synthesizer, what if you now want to have multiple ones? If you have software, you can just create different instances or just expand, really explore. So yeah, that's sort of in a very brief nutshell.
Well, that's good. I mean, I like how you said it. It's your conversation with the synthesizer.
Yeah.
And that's how you're describing the ability to have conversations with different synthesizers, but the more expression capability, like the better communication, right? Isn't that the idea? Like
it is
more of a two-way thing.
So what I'm really passionate about is when I look mostly at my fingers, because those are the things that I use, but people use other like body parts, whatever.
Sure,
right?
but fingers are touch generally.
So having that relationship where you create the smallest gesture, having it influence the sound, getting that instant feedback, creating that feedback loop where you will create new gestures, and then you explore that whole universe as a dialogue with the synthesizer, the sound, and you. That's what really resonates with me.
That's interesting because you work on software, and we're talking about controllers right now.
Yeah.
So how did we get in? So I mean, we don't have these controllers yet. I'm noticing that it's the advent of these controllers, right? Because they didn't exist before. It's mostly on-off switches.
Exactly.
And maybe we were getting some velocity control and then some monophonic aftertouch here and there. Not a lot of sideways, not a lot of up and down. And now there's more stuff. And then there's connection horizontally where we can slide pitch, brightness, volume, right? These types of things. But it's not available everywhere.
It's not.
But so are you saying like when you develop a digital instrument, then people can mix and match the type of controller that works for them, the language they speak?
Yes. So about 10 years ago, I had these type of conversations. So I worked at a company called Eigenharp that made a controller, one of the first controllers that had these capabilities. At that time, the Continuum, who is still around,
that does go back.
Was already there, and Lippold really like innovated like with his vision for the Continuum.
Yeah.
And there was not really an easy way to connect these controllers with software synthesizers, and so sort of helped start what is now called MPE, that specification. That worked on that with the Media Association for, I mean, it's been 10 years now. We got the first version out 6 years ago, and then kept improving it. But now that there is this very simple common language that people can speak to connect together.
And if I'm saying it correctly, MIDI polyphonic expression?
Yes, MIDI polyphonic
That's
expression.
what MPE stands for, okay.
Now this advent is really being felt across the industry. Like now it is possible to take even analog synthesizers that have polyphonic capabilities, or even like in the video that you showed, since MPE channelizes everything, you can say this modular will be in charge of that channel, which in my mind is like this modular is in charge of that string on the guitar. It's almost like a modular becomes a string.
Right, a voice of some kind, a string or whatever, however you want to look at it.
And yeah, like it's been proliferating. If you look at the show here, it's quite remarkable how many like innovators and creators like have that same idea, because I think it's really infectious. Once you do this, once you have that experience where you don't have the on-off switches, but you are really connected to the sounds, it's hard to go back.
Right. It's like water going on a piece of paper. It's seeping.
Yeah.
And then you can't really get the water out anymore. It's like, so that does seem where we are. But it's like the manufacturers are kind of having to decide, like, we already have a product that doesn't have that keyboard on it or whatever. They're going to have to figure that. That's my guess. I don't know that side of things, but I can understand it a little bit.
Yeah, it's some of the conversations we're having now at Moog, because like it takes a long time to make great products, and obviously we have a bunch of things that have already been started and that are like in the process. How do we get that in there? And we're definitely looking at this, because
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, because Moog is a legacy company, and it would be great to have that. There's still a sound that's associated with it, and to be able to, that's what I discovered when I used the Continuum on the Moog 3C.
Yeah.
And suddenly, and I have enough experience with Moog Modular, but then to hear sounds come out of it that I never could make before. Yeah. And so it's like you're talking about having a conversation, but all of a sudden this thing's coming at me like it's the same language, but like new words. Like it's suddenly like a child talking to an adult that has the vocabulary this big, and I've got 100-word vocabulary, right? So you can understand my analogy.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to catch up.
Yeah.
Because I've only had a couple of experiences doing it, and then we have to get to the point, because right now it's a lot of patch chords.
Right.
I'm going to say, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to set up a rig, I need to have it more permanent so that I can more comfortably sit down and have these we're using conversations over and over, but
it is really that, right?
But I want to do it. I don't want to have to, like, before I have the conversation, have to make a big mess, and then if something gets jimmied, then I have to find out, well, something's unplugged, where is it? That's where we are now with it. But you're in a position to start to create elegant solutions.
Yep.
And you're talking to performers and composers and producers, whoever it is that's working with the instruments. And now we're starting to get into, like, we're making instruments again.
That are designed for it, and that they feel like acoustic instruments, but they have the capabilities of electronic instruments. So you have all the advantage of acoustic instruments, like make it part of who you are and like get that physical interaction with it. But now you're not limited by but the sound that the physicality can make, thanks to the electronic instruments. But in the software realm, which is where I've done a lot of work, we already like made a lot of headway. So like every synthesizer we've released in the software realm already understands MPE, because most of them can be expressed from a touchscreen.
Yeah.
So the touchscreen has 2 dimensions for touch, and we really wanted to leverage that. And so that has propagated through all the software synths we've made, and it taught us a lot. It taught us a lot of what works, what doesn't work. And now we're looking at how we can apply that in the hardware devices.
So, I mean, I thought we set out to talk about digital and analog, and it's really, it actually, this is what's so surprising about actually having a conversation between two humans. Sometimes what you think, what you're going to expect is not necessarily going to happen if you're open to just listening. Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing coming from you is, like, we're talking about music. We're talking about interacting with instruments. And that's more important than any of this digital versus analog stuff about what does it sound like? Does analog sound better than digital?
Look,
this is great.
It's like there is this lady, like I live in Asheville, North Carolina, And I always go back to this image of, there's a really famous musician in Asheville, and she's called the Spoon Lady. And she is extremely expressive with two metal spoons. And she will sit on the corner of the street, and she's got musicians with her. And what she gets out of those two spoons is mind-blowing. Like,
Yeah.
she figures out how to transcend the limitations of the object that she has, and she resonates with that instrument. So yeah, I personally think that the technical details are often far less important than what an instrument allows a creator to express.
That's for sure true. And then to build the instrument with the because I don't think, this is my conjecture, that digital enough builds it with the interface in mind first. Because there's all this software out there, and then it's like, oh, you can hook up any controller for it.
Right.
But it's like, if you knew what the controller was, then you would know like the types of things that you could do.
Yeah.
And then the instrument would be more focused, because you don't need an instrument to do everything.
Right.
If it does too much, it's like too confusing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I want to use a violin for what it does. And as a composer, I know what it does. I can cover certain emotions and certain pitch ranges, and you talked about gestures.
Right.
Certain gestures they stir up your emotions as a
Right.
consumer or a listener. And I want synthesizers to do the same thing. It's kind of a more mature approach, looking down on it from a bigger picture, not just like making a bunch of cool software and then you can't control it. Because like with the Continuum, you can make a sine wave sound amazing.
There you go. Yeah, because you are the envelope. You're the one modulating every aspect of the sound.
Yeah.
But that is where I think is also, like, I play a lot of instruments because I'm really interested in discovering what the human interface is, like which parts do what. So like I play the Chapman stick, I play the arpeggi, I started with guitar, I play the Eigenharp, I just started learning drums. And when I have conversations with people about that, and they say, it's so much work to learn all of these new gestures, right?
Yeah.
You have to get past that tipping point of where it becomes not frustrating anymore, and you actually feel like you can get your emotions out through your gestures. Now, if you have a controller that you resonate with, like a control mechanism that can capture your way of gesturing the best, and then you can hook that up to different sound engines. Now, you can get really good at playing one sound, but your technique can be applied to another sound, and you will learn the intricacies of that other sound, but you don't have to learn the whole human interface again. So I think it's not about, oh, we can make all the sounds in the world and everything is possible. It is about the skills you've already acquired, and now you can express yourself with more things that you intimately resonate with.
But sort of the culture of digital is like, now I have an iPhone and I can have 10,000 songs on it. But I mean, really, a traditional record collector would have their top 100 vinyl, and it'd be like, you could see it in the thing this big, and you can visualize it and go, I understand it, and these are the things I want to go to, you know. But with digital, the culture, again, it's just like, I can have as many instances as I want. And I'm like, well, how is that a selling point? I want to have one instance that I can control first.
Right.
Then if I can have more instances, I'll go to 2.
Right.
And then I'll go to 4 and build up what I need according to the music. But also, like, I don't always want to write for 100 strings.
That's true.
Sometimes I want to write for 20 because it's more transparent and it's just more intimate. Or string quartet or solo. I'm using the string analogy because they've figured this stuff out already over time.
Oh, yeah.
But where are the instrument makers? There's a couple here. There's tons of software and hardware makers. Like, I don't know, maybe Moog one day says we should... but maybe it's too early, you know, because we don't need also 100 different interfaces of instruments and just say like, well, people will find whatever's best for them. We got to tell people too that these are proving to be the best, and then we can have kids come in and learn these ones, and because that's going to be the next gen to me.
Oh yeah.
Where there's a pedagogy of learning how to perform on something, and somebody could teach you and get you there quicker. You can always learn by trial and error, right? But you can read a book, or you can ask. We'll have masters,
right?
Because we have a few now.
We have a few, and you touch on a really good point. Like teaching curriculum is a really hard topic to cover. And if things move too fast,
Right.
like what you said, if there's too many changes in the human interface, then that can never be created. And there's a lot of people that need this, that need some kind of guidance to know, tell me what to do, tell me how to approach it, what are the recommended like gestures. It's also about like playing position and what gives you the best results and what is actually detrimental. Sometimes there are things that will cause tendinitis, or like all these things will like we need to figure them out, right?
Totally important thing.
Yeah.
But you know, a lot of that stuff has to emerge over time.
Right.
And I gravitate towards the continuum right now because there's been 10 years of...
There's been 10 years. L'instrument also has 10 years behind it. The continuum has been way longer than that, though. I think continuum is like, I know exactly, it's 20.
Please correct me.
Yeah, I don't know the exact year. I'm really bad at dates. But I started on L'Instrument 10 years ago, so the continuum was already around. L'Instrument now has also like a really great community. We've kept the interface exactly the same for all this time and evolved the capabilities with the firmware. So I'm sorry, I don't know if we haven't talked about this, I think, but like Roger Lynn and I collaborated on the L'Instrument. I wrote all the firmware for it.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So that it's a joint project that we've been doing since like for 10 years now. And we're now seeing that there are like a number of people that have discovered like recommended ways of playing it, because we didn't even know when we started, right? Like what is the right tuning of the rows? Like how much, like what should the offsets be? Like should we quantize or not? Should we pick out the notes in the scale and prevent people from playing the wrong notes, or should we leave everything available? Right? These are all questions that we had. We're like, we don't know. Maybe it's this, maybe it's not. And then when you get like the early adopters really explore it and then find things that work, find things that don't work, then share it with others on forums. And now there's a bunch of people that have started to write like, this is how I approach chords, this is how I approach lead lines, this is how I get the fastest playing, this is how I get the most expression. And it's taken a long time.
Of course it does. But it's going to take less than it took when we went from the clavichord to the harpsichord to the pianoforte, when it was all muddy, you know, or different ranges, and they had to sort this stuff out. I mean, that's what instrument making is. It's sort of a process, and you're never really there. Like they're refining pianos
all the time.
All the time. You know, Yamaha's acquired Bösendorfer, and that instrument's Yamaha is learning from the German technology, and they're integrating it, but they're not messing with Bösendorfer because they know better, because there's time-tested things. And so I like to see more instrument manufacturers, but I find it really fascinating that now I know why we're talking about expressivity, because you were introduced to me as software. You're quite an interesting person. I mean, that you are so adept at both. But we're really fortunate. That's really lucky that you're designing software thinking about expression at all times, because that's what's that's you. Yeah. That's what you care about.
It's what I care about, and I always try to explore what else can make people more expressive. And there's like dozens of projects that I start, and then I put them out in the world, and I get feedback from people, and then it's like I just did something with the Apple Watch, where like released it 3 weeks ago. Like, what if the Apple Watch can be a part of your expression, and the gestures of your hands can augment your playing, right?
Well, that's called a conductor.
Yes, it is.
Because they move through their body to the orchestra. And when I learned conducting, the most important thing that I was taught, Hans Beer was my conducting teacher. Breathe with each beat, because when you breathe, they'll follow you.
Right.
Begin.
Yeah.
It's like this, you know, the image of the Sistine Chapel and breathing in life into things. And that's kind of ultimate expression, is through the breath. That's how we live, right?
Yes.
But when you talk about gestures, you naturally breathe through gestures. So it kind of gives me a really great feeling when you talk about what are you doing with the Apple Watch? Expressing sound?
It's a MIDI controller over Bluetooth. so you can connect it to any device that can receive Bluetooth MIDI.
That's amazing, and it's on you all the time.
It's on you all the time. There's a few different things, like you can have virtual knobs and buttons. Those are just for configuring. But then you can have 3-dimensional positioning, and you can also have triggers based on acceleration.
Wow.
Like you can do this
or
this, and it
versus this.
right, and that will change what happens.
But that's conducting again.
There you go. Yeah.
That's going to be
Yep.
Slow crescendo, and this is going to be
Yep.
sforzando.
Yep.
Boom. No, I mean it's built in, and we can take this stuff from the past and integrate it into this thinking.
Yeah, I did another. There's like another device. It's called Leap Motion that detects your hand's position with infrared cameras. I did that about, I don't know when that was, 8 years ago, and that was the first feedback I got was from composers that had these huge orchestral sound libraries, and they had no way to intuitively do like the conductor gestures. They would have to use switches and knobs and little wheels, and it would never be that breathing that you talk about. And that got the biggest uptake was with those type of people, where they were expressing the different instruments, playing the notes with the right hand, and then they would like express the orchestra and with the other hand.
Yeah.
And this makes this even more accessible because it's always with you, and you're not bound by, because that other device, you had quite a limited range in where your hand could be. Here, it's just where you are.
Well, so we talked about touch in the fingers, right? But expression also comes from through the breath to the gestures of the limbs, right?
Yes.
And I learned something interesting. I performed at NASA.
Oh.
About in 2006, it was a conference for the top high school students all across the globe, from every continent, who had science projects that they could take to market. They were incredible students, only maybe 2 or 4 from each continent or country, right? Yeah. Mixed with the Stanford teachers and astronauts and all that. And I had kids having their hands on synths, and I was talking and playing and making sounds and hanging out with high school kids. But I learned something really, really profound from some of the Stanford professors, because it was at the advent of the beginning of making videos for online college courses.
Okay.
And they made the videos, and they did the shots from here. They were head shots. And then something was missing. What was missing? They didn't.
You're down
but they didn't have. When you speak and you use your hands, probably Italians are really good at this. There's more understanding, quicker understanding. So they reshot all the videos, shooting above the torso, so that the people, when they naturally would move their hands or their shoulders or their bodies, anything, we pick up clues as humans, right?
Oh, yeah.
So music too, when you watch a guitar player, all this air guitar and stuff, it's not for nothing.
It's not for nothing.
Some of it could be for nothing, but some of it is for something.
Yep. And you can also I had this video that this guy sent me when he was first using that software, and just looking at his gestures without sound, you could imagine what would be going on. Because you have all these commonly understood, it gets louder, you diminish it, you have sharp attacks, and you move through space, you can already see, and if you tie that to time, so it's the gestures and the speed of the gestures and the direction of the gestures, now you already have a lot of visual information, right?
If you tie it to time, you have a story.
Yeah, there you go.
You add words to sentences, to paragraphs, to chapters, and then you build the chapters and you're going somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And then you see the gesture again in a different way, and we're farther along and all that. Yeah. Well, that's this. I can't even tell you. I think we're going to have to make a different video, because I still really want to know about how you do the software part. But it's great, because this is telling me that it is secondary.
It is secondary, but we can cycle back to it now. One of the things I thought was remarkable when I did the Model 15 software. So we made a software version of the Model 15 modular synthesizer, and I was still living in Belgium at the time, and we got it to sound really great. The sound engine took a long time, but it sounded spot on. But something was off. It didn't feel good when you were using it. And at one point, what I was doing was I had the physical Model 15, and I had my hand on the iPad, my finger on the iPad, and I was turning the knob on the physical one, like touching on the iPad, and I was trying to get the same motion relationship of like the distance you change on the knob to how the sound changes and over the whole range of the knob. And that was like one of the pieces that was missing for it for the software version to actually come to life. And that was really interesting to me because I had never experienced that before. And it's like just sitting there, like I was like, my kids are like, "What are you doing?" It's like, I'm trying to feel the knob. It's like I'm trying to really feel it and to see if it's
because you're doing this and the knob is this.
the knob
you're
is this,
doing this.
and you're doing this, but there's still a curve throughout the motion that you make, right? There is a relationship between the distance that your fingers move,
Right, I understand.
the effort that your
It's
muscles
energy.
have to do, there you go, and how that relates to the sound. And that is often not even an exponential curve or a linear curve or a logarithmic curve. Often it's a little bit of this here and then a little bit of that there, and then it goes up in another dimension. And if you don't have that, then the knob doesn't feel satisfying because
Not at all.
you have that one area that you can't do anything, and then the other area where it's like way too much.
Like from a kinetic view, expenditure of energy has to do with like the flow.
Yeah.
And when you expend energy and there's no flow, it can be painful.
Mm-hmm.
But you can expend all kinds of energy, and if it's flow, you get more good feeling energy from it, you know, and endorphins even come from it. But when you get fatigued sometimes when you're trying to move things and they don't respond in a satisfying way.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, you know, again, we're lucky to have that you don't just solve the problem and just say, now we can get brighter.
Right.
That's not the problem.
That's solved. Yeah. Right? We have all the algorithms to do these things, right? Like, and they're even available in, like, you have them in papers, you have open source implementations, like a lot of the things there are solved. Now there's always interesting problems, technical problems that haven't been solved yet, but we've solved a lot of them, right?
I see. And when you make, like you made the Model 15, right? It's not a C or anything. It's a
Model
cabinet.
15. Yeah.
They're the black cabinets, right?
Right.
Those are the ones I learned on at USC. I think they had 3 cabinets there. Was it? Yeah, it was a 15. 35s too are in the similar looking cabinet, right?
Yeah.
So when you say it was spot on, spot on in terms of the sound if I didn't have to turn any knobs, right? Because you're saying there were some things to discover about that. But spot on where if I heard a raw sawtooth, could I tell the difference?
If you didn't know, we did like blind A/B testing with people that used these modulars all the time. So we set them up in our studio. We didn't tell them we had 2 keyboards, didn't tell them how they were hooked up. And just like play. And
you matched the best you can match it.
Yeah, and they couldn't tell the difference. But in analog instruments, you also always have differences. Like if you would have 2 Model 15s next to each other, they wouldn't sound exactly the same, right? So it's about, to me, it's about going to the nature of that oscillator. What makes that oscillator? And it's all the imperfections, it's all the non-linearities, it's all the subtle saturations. And once you identify what defines the nature of that, you already have so many variations in the hardware realm. It's just another variation alongside all the other ones.
I know my oscillators by number. So when I get them worked on, I know where they are and which ones stay in tune more, which ones are brighter, which ones tear more.
It's one of the things we wanted to do, but then we decided not. We were at one point going to make each version of the app, because it was on an iPad, sound differently based on the version number of the serial number of the iPad, where you would have a Model 15 that sounded different on your iPad than your friend's iPad.
I would like that. What about, do you make each oscillator different?
Yeah.
Because you have to, or it wouldn't sound like.
Each oscillator is different, and they're all with all these variations.
But they're the same on any one that I buy.
Yes, they're
the instances.
Yes, and this is still something that I want to explore. And we actually at one point, and that never got into the final product. We even made like a whole series of different versions of the UI, where you had different components would age differently and would have different blemishes, and you would sort of. The idea was that the software version would be your unique software version.
Yeah, I like it. Well, then you could sell that software version and say, I have one that sounds different. It sounds like warmer or whatever.
And then you get into then you have that relationship with an instrument that is your unique preference. And so maybe we might still do that. I had kind of forgotten that we had that laying around.
I think it's great. It's like a personality though. Like, I don't have a dog I bought the same pedigree, but it's like exactly like a robot.
Right. Yeah, I know you want that. Yeah.
Not really. Yeah. I mean, you want to show up like wearing the same outfit as the other person. It's exactly the same. I don't know. It's personality, and music has to do with that too. Like you can hear the piece of music by a different conductor, same music, totally different tempo. Different. It changes. It breathes differently. It's a personality, and you can get a different experience. Otherwise, do you really want to hear it, or do you want to go and see a band and hear the recording? You want to get a different how they feel that day.
No, I know some other work for my team to look at when I get back.
It's worth exploring. Who knows? You have a lot of issues.
I had forgotten about it honestly, and I was really excited by that idea. And we went really far along in it.
I would be excited if I bought it. I mean, be like, I want to go hear what mine sounds like. It's like the prize inside the egg.
Yes. And then there was because there's been this discussion about how do you create scarcity in the digital realm, right? Because you can then have as many copies of anything as you want. So now what is your relationship with this version of the digital? And they try to do that with blockchain and... Which is I've always had a problem with that, because then you create artificial scarcity, which is, why would you create artificial scarcity, right? I think what
fear.
You're looking for is uniqueness.
I know, but fear, maybe that's why.
Fear.
Or greed or whatever.
Greed, mostly greed. But if you're not limiting something so that everyone has access to it, but there's uniqueness to each, then you actually create scarcity, because there will only be a limited number of variations of that thing.
Yeah, and it's genuine, and it's for a purpose, because you're making more unique things, which is that's what you want to do. It works.
Thank you for making me think of that again.
I don't know. It's coming up. I really didn't think we'd be talking about expression. I want to ask you this though. So you made it sound exactly the same, but what I noticed, and this is like something I noticed.
Okay.
And I've mentioned it to other people when I'm using anything digital replication of something. Not if there's no replication, it kind of doesn't matter. Because again, it doesn't exist before. So it's like, well, then would you rather not have it exist? That's a whole other discussion.
Right.
And then don't make anything new, But I'm waiting for that, where we're going to start making digital things that were like Bob Moog coming up with something that didn't exist,
We just did. We just released Mariana, which is the spiritual successor of our bass synthesizer line.
Spiritual successor?
Yeah. So we had the whole Taurus line, and then we did
the bass pedals.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then we had the Minotaur, and this is Moog's new bass synth. Is a software synth. And we took everything we learned from that. We have the sound engine from Model 15 that we improved and developed over the years. But we created a new version in software because we think it stands perfectly on its own as our new bass synthesizer.
It's not a replication of anything.
No, it's our new bass synthesizer.
Yeah, that'll be great to hear.
Yeah, we did that end of last year.
Well, what I'm getting at is when I hear digital, the attack bothers me.
Okay.
In so many ways, and even if digital processing that I really love, like the best digital reverb, I really love it.
Okay.
But I love how it sings after the attack.
Okay.
And so I always do this with whatever I put through a processor, pedal, whatever. I put straight signal in, and I almost want the digital to just, I don't know, to just sing after the attack. Because I love how it sings after the attack. And so I always do this with whatever I put through a processor, pedal, whatever. I put straight signal in, and I almost want the digital to just sing after the attack. know when to come in right after I hear just the nice attack,
Okay.
you know? It always does, it never gets the attack right for me. And I've asked some people and they tell me because it can't, because it's not, there's too much going on and we can't sample fast enough. And so you do oversampling and all these things that are compensating,
Right.
but they're not really clearly doing it. And then we've even gone into discussions that there's things that humans perceive that are beyond the 44.1.
Sure.
And we can't just say that because they're picking it up. So how are they picking it up? But where are you on all this? I'm throwing probably too many things at you.
No, it's okay. I think there is a difference between generating and processing. I think,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're
lot.
talking about processing, and I can see what you're talking about because I've definitely experienced difficulties in getting transients to really sound the way I
Right,
want.
because the computers aren't, we want it to.
And it is part of it is also because there's always in a digital, when you process something digitally, there's a sample rate. I'm not sure the sample rate matters that much because you can make really highly oversamples, but you always deal with a buffer. You can't avoid having a buffer of audio that the computer or whatever DSP piece of like that runs a DSP has to put audio in, process it, and put it back out. And that will inherently always create an additional latency, but also latency for the humans to perceive. So now I'm
Yeah.
not saying it is that way, but one of the things that I've been wondering about, if it is not the like flam effect where you have like a very subtle, even if it's like milliseconds of latency, right? 2 milliseconds of latency, you can't perceive it if you generate, right? But if you process a sound, now you have the dry signal and you have the wet signal.
Right.
And they might not exactly align the way you expect them to align. And then you have that like, okay, well.
I know, but alignment is, now we're talking about perception thing. It's like when the planets are out of alignment, there's things that are supposed to go crazy, right?
Yes.
Alignment,
Yeah,
do we care about alignment?
we do.
Yeah. Okay, so that's good.
Yeah,
I mean,
so that is a problem when you have, imagine you have an analog signal that you can hear in analog and it goes through in analog, and then you have digital processing on top of that, then you will always have, even if it's very small latency, it will always have
it's
that.
serial. It has to go through the thing like a train.
And it will be a little bit later, and so that initial transient will not be the same as if you would have a full analog chain, right? Now, one thing to try, and I don't know if you've tried that, is what if you put the whole thing through the digital processor? Because then you don't get that flam effect. Then, even though there is a little bit of latency on the processing, the signal itself will also have that latency.
It'll move together.
Right.
But I get a squish. I don't know. That's why I cheat that transient in.
Gotcha.
I'm not there yet with
Yeah.
it. And and like you said, there's a difference. And when I listen to music back and it's all done and it's just reproducing a big stereo thing, the 44.1's fine.
Right.
I can enjoy music of any kind of nature. I hear the kick drums all sound good and all that kind of stuff. But in the real time thing, so you know what I'm talking about.
Another thought I have, and that is something that we struggle with a lot when we do the software versions of the instruments, is gain staging. Like clipping in the analog realm is a pleasing thing. People like it.
You're nailing the two things are transients and distortion.
Right. But in the digital realm, clipping is horrible, right?
Yeah,
So
it's not complex.
Yes, it's harsh and it doesn't sound good.
It's one-dimensional. Like, okay,
So
I'm done with that. Like, I want to hear more crappy stuff, and then I'm happy again.
So if by accident something, and transients are usually like where your peaks are, if by accident you have like a very small clipping that is introduced in the digital signal chain, and yes, we can model different saturation techniques, but they don't stack as well in digital as they stack in analog. if you have one at the end,
Yeah.
it works great in digital.
Totally.
But if you have one through the signal, multiple ones through the signal chain, there you go. That's your squish. They squash the sound instead of like.
It squishes it. I know I'm hearing
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
and I just don't use. But it's like, if I want to distort a synth, I'll distort it like one track, but like it doesn't layer like an analog, like a guitar with your guitar amp. I can put 10 tracks
Right,
of that,
yeah.
all distorted, and
Yeah.
it just gets either better or too big or whatever. But
Right.
it's all kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I can't do like a digital distressor or any kind of these things. Multiple of the same instrument. If
would
I
be
do different
curious-
instruments, it's better.
I would be curious. We got to cycle back on this. I would be curious to hear your experience with Mariana.
Yeah, let's go. I mean, I
because-
try anything and see.
We did a lot of work on being able to stack Mariana, then the distortion of Mariana.
You have a distortion, digital distortion?
Yes, and it clips and it's got a nice saturation.
No, I
but
wanna hear it.
We did it with that in mind. So we came up with a few tricks and like approaches to make the saturation not like collapse when you put multiple tracks of Mariana, but expand. So I'd be
So it
curious.
sings.
It sings, and I'd be curious to hear if you experience that.
Yeah, because it feels like a conk on the head, like the digital distortion. It just doesn't sing through the tone. It's just like, ah. And it's like, whoa, what just happened? Somebody just clipped me.
Yeah.
You know, I get a real visual thing on it. And digital is great for bass. I mean, it's like the best thing that ever happened to bass. Like, and you go to a movie and you capture bass on a digital, and it's like, whoa. But it's not a lot of it's low frequency, you know? So there's not, even with the sample rates and stuff, and the bit resolution, it just seems like lower frequencies are more forgiving for a lot of things. For tuning, they just are. Like if I want to get something in tune, I tune the high note.
Right.
Then everything's in tune.
Yes, that's true.
I think kind of more primitively.
Right.
But that's music, you know, I got to get it right and then we play. And, you know, if it doesn't work, then you just figure out what's missing and you compensate, even on the fly. Musicians, we compensate.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Because instruments do a lot of weird stuff.
Oh yeah.
We don't even know it,
Yes.
you know. Especially with these devices. I love what you said about the instrument too, knowing how much, you know, this movement's going to do, because you could fly off the rails and then nobody could get the thing right.
Right.
But you want to get it just right, where you naturally, and this is where I love it, when you first hit it, you're just a little bit wrong, and then you naturally compensate, and it's like a quick tension and release, and you feel like, wow, that's a human.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, and now I'm with you.
And that's the hardest part of these sensors, is like from no touch to touch, like that moment of
Yeah, that's everything.
it's like you have to be able to almost caress it, and then it does something, right? If you already,
I see what you mean,
right,
yeah.
If you already have to put a significant amount of force on it, and then something happens, like then you miss that human initial like caress,
You miss
the
it.
human initial touch, where you're like, okay, we're going to start that conversation, and like this is me, and there we go, right? And that is when I try all the new controllers out, like often people are looking at me. It's the first thing I do. It's like, how do I go from nothing to something?
That's it. It's a profound instance. Instant. It's an instant, I guess,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Like when you touch something that's alive, right at that point of contact, you know it's alive, where like if you touch something dead,
Yeah.
as humans, we kind of know right away.
Right.
And then you just kind of you got a kind of a drop in energy when you know
Exactly.
something's dead. Something's alive, you get like curious, right?
Like,
And you-
yeah. What else is gonna happen?
well, if I touch more, does it respond? You know, this
Yeah.
is all like real, like getting exciting.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you're touching someone, and then you get it gives back something. It's like that's back to the relationship
Yeah.
or the conversation type of thing. Well, you're really tapped in. I'm totally impressed.
Oh.
I'm really totally impressed. This is a remarkable conversation for me to have with you. I mean, and I'm learning a ton about this.
I love this because I'm like, you've inspired me in quite a few ways now. Like I had forgotten a bunch of things that we started working on, and it's really cool to hear your point of view on all these things, and that it, like you connected everything up with your modular system, and it seems like you're on this journey now. Like
Yeah.
you're like, oh, where does this go?
Yeah, and what's great about it is I don't have to throw away anything.
No?
You know, I can just take all the parts with me along the way, and that makes it pretty joyful, you know, because like it wasn't all for nothing. And that's the true, like, studying history, you know, when it's really great. You learn from your mistakes, and this is what's happening with you too, with your discoveries, and there's little areas that you have to still solve.
Oh, yeah.
But we're never going to be there. We don't. And if we can find journeys that we could enjoy, you know, that's life.
Yes.
Yeah, right. A moment with Geert, this is like the best. If you ever get a chance to go to Superbooth.
This was incredible.
Yeah, hanging out at places like this, and just the vibe here. And this is like a kids park, I think. There's like
it's a family center.
the whole center.
Yeah.
So just having these kids all around and making noises. Just,
There's a swimming pool right there. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I haven't seen the pool, but I saw the pirate ship and the zip line. That looks really fun. Yeah,
I really like getting here because some people take the Uber and then get dropped off here, but you can also take the train, and then the train is about a 15-minute walk through the forest to get to this.
Oh, we saw the tracks.
But that's another train. Like they have a little train that goes around
just
the park,
here,
right? But then you also have the S-Bahn that goes from downtown Berlin to here, and then from that stop, you basically have a walk through the forest, and this is a perfect start of your day.
It gets you set.
Yes, yeah. It gets you in touch with nature. Then you see a few humans. You start. Yeah, it's good.
And the electronic stuff is like it's not as an inside thing now for some reason. I just think like it's connecting more with nature and feeling and touching and senses and all that. You know, I think it's kind of appropriate.
It is.
I like it.
It is. It really
it's hard
is.
to put it into words, but please do it again.
Yeah.
Let's talk more. I want to talk to you on the phone or whatever, and hear more of the things that you're coming up with.
I'll be in California in a few weeks. Maybe we can like have dinner or something.
Yeah, you should do it.
Yeah.
Come by.
Yeah.
We'll have a little family thing. Beautiful. Well, thank you guys. Remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us a lot. And seeing people here and getting the comments, you know, face to face, and seeing like how much the stuff that's coming out on the channel is affecting you, and also reading the comments and how it's affecting me, because it's like it's just a learning thing for all of us. We're at a really great period in time, like with this instrument development and music and generations coming together. And so I've said this to a few people. It seems like we're doing a better job interfacing globally than the rest of the world is.
It's interesting because like I see you with your son, and you told me that story about like the boy who made the synth with his mom.
Yeah.
But I have
Jacob.
a similar thing with my daughters where like we've been connecting again over music, and they're 24 and 28, and like one of my daughters is learning to play the guitar, but I'm in the US, so I'm like we're gonna start doing Zoom calls.
Yeah.
And my oldest daughter, she's really into singing, so she's now actually taken songs I wrote 10 years ago, and that she like didn't really pay attention to, but now she's making covers of my songs, which is like
Yeah, what a feeling.
Yeah.
Best stuff. Until next time, come and join us next year. I want to be here.
Yeah. Bye.